Is your obesity and metabolic issues your fault? Hi, I'm Tom, and this is my carnivore journey. So, a lot of times I think we blame individuals for their health and metabolic issues. But the question is it really their fault? I kind of think it's a split there. Especially for the younger people. I think it's more not their fault than it is the older people, my age or even older, because we grew up eating proper nutrition. So we know what we're supposed to eat. Unfortunately, with the food pyramid and all the government recommendations and doctor recommendations, American Heart Disease, American Diabetic Association, and so forth, put out all these guidelines of what we're supposed to eat, and people adhered to it. And now we have the mess that we have. But on the flip side of that, you also have other information, especially in the last 10 years, that has really brought to light the detriment that these recommendations have caused. So you kind of have to wonder if people have fallen into the trap of complacency and say, well, I'm following the guidelines and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and this is just the way it is. There's nothing I can do about it. Instead of reaching out and doing research and figuring out that what we've been taught and told for the last 50 years or so is completely wrong. So I think there's a little bit of blame on both sides. If you're not willing to go out and do the research and figure out what works for you, then that's on you. But you can't sit back and just continue to follow the guidelines that got you to the point that you're at. And I think what happens eventually with a lot of people is, after 10 or 15 years of just being sick and morbidly obese and so on, they finally get to their last straw, and that's when they finally start to research and figure out what's appropriate for them. And I think there's a lot of different ways people can get to their goals and heal. It's not always the carnivore that is the way for everybody. Ketogenic diets work for some people. Carnivore works for some people. For some people, they have to go all the way down to the lion diet. So it really depends on the issues you have, how long you've had these issues, how long you've followed these guidelines and eaten the wrong way, and what you've eaten over the years. And I think that really kind of plays into what you're going to do to correct what's wrong. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all for everybody. You do what works for you. But for the vast majority of people, I'm going to say that some form of carnivore diet is going to work. Basically, a carnivore diet is an elimination diet, which is really what you want to do. You're going to want to eliminate the things that could be causing issues with either your health or your weight. And the only way you can do that is to simplify what you're eating and try to isolate what's causing the issue. Now, I typically tell people to try carnivore, and a fairly strict carnivore, for 30 days. Just meat, butter, salt, water. That's pretty much it. And after 30 days, you can kind of expand that out a little bit, add in some dairy and things like that to kind of see what it is that's causing issues and what's contributing to your weight. Now for me, I'm not a strict carnivore. I'm probably 90 to 95%. I still have a few things that I will consume, but I've learned over the last 8 months that these foods don't cause me issues. So I know I can eat them. However, there's a caveat with that. I can eat them, but I can't eat a lot of them, because if I eat a lot of them, then I do have issues. So I'm aware of what I can and cannot eat. I'm aware of how much of it I can eat. And as you progress in your journey, you're going to find the same thing. Now, some people, depending on issues they have, even deviating off of carnivore can cause issues, no matter what it is. And the only way you're going to know that is to get yourself to a point where your system's clean, and then start reintroducing foods and figure out, where you stand, what you can have, what you can't have. But sitting here and blaming people completely for the issues they're having, I don't think is really fair, especially for the younger generation, because they're eating what they've been told to eat. And a lot of our diets are dictated by how we're raised. So, I see people that, oh, well, my whole family's overweight. Well, it's because of how your whole family ate, and whatever you ate or whatever they ate is what you're eating. So you can't really say that unless you change what you're eating. Now, I do think there are some people who are predisposed to carrying more weight than other people, and are also predisposed to certain medical conditions that other people aren't. And the problem that I see with a lot of the diets, the food recommendations, the exercise recommendations, is everybody's DNA and genetics are different. So what works for you isn't necessarily going to work for the next person, and so on. So, diet and nutrition really has to be individualized based on how your body reacts to things. And to have these studies come out and say, well, this is the best way, or this is the best food, and this, that, and the other thing, just doesn't hold water, because nobody is identical unless you have an identical twin. Other than that, we're all different. We all respond differently to, different foods, medications, exercise. These are all things that you really can't group people into this big pool and expect to do a study and get finite results. Now, you can get generalized results, but again, these have to be randomized controlled studies. You can't just have people fill out a piece of paper and expect that to be accurate. If you're not having labs done on these people, if you're not controlling what they're eating and drinking, then there is no way, absolutely no way, that you can come to any sort of conclusion that is concise. You just can't do it. Now, there were a few studies that were done back when we had mental institutions and hospitals back in the 60s, and those studies and the data that they provide show that a ketogenic and carnivore diet works. They've known about ketogenic diets for treating epilepsy since the early 1900s. So this notion that we got to eat all this other crap is just BS, because we've known. The first recorded instance of a carnivore diet is from the 1700s. So, this isn't anything new. It's just new now because people have forgotten about it. A lot of what we have now is a result of World War II, with all of the food that we had to supply to the GIs. We had to have something that we could ship to them. So this is where the notion of preservatives and additives and things like that would keep this food edible being shipped from the United States to Europe or to the Pacific or wherever our soldiers happen to be. And one name that really contributes to that is Ancel Keys. And if you don't know that name, he's the guy that pushed out this lipid hypothesis that cholesterol and saturated fats cause coronary heart disease. So, he's really to blame on a couple of fronts, because he's basically the grandfather of processed food as we know it, and for getting these dietary recommendations set up that has led us down this road. Now, I'm not saying he's the only one for processed food, but I think he kind of perfected it a little bit. Some processed food really came into being around the early 1900s and moving forward, and it progressed pretty rapidly. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that people were leaving farms to go to work in factories. So they weren't growing their own food anymore. They were relying on whatever local farms could get food to their area. And a lot of times the food was bad. I mean, even meat, they would doctor up meat and make it look good, even though it was rancid. So I think there's a lot of issues when you try and throw blame on an individual. And like I said, I think there's a little bit to blame because the information's out there. It's been out there. It's been mainstream for quite a while. But I think people just become complacent. You know, we don't like change as humans. And so, you know, you've got one side of the fence going, oh, if you eat saturated fats and a lot of cholesterol and eggs and so on and so forth, you're going to die of a heart attack when you're 50. And then you have the other side of the coin going, well, if you don't eat it, you're going to die of a heart attack at 50. So it all comes down to who has the deepest pockets and could get the message out there. You also have to look at the fact that if the recommendation were to come out that, yep, carnivore and ketovore is the best way to eat, you got a lot of food companies that are going to lose billions of dollars. It's going to affect the farming economy because that's our biggest thing is our exports on wheat, soybean, and corn. So it behooves us to do our own homework and figure out what we're supposed to eat to keep ourselves lean and healthy, because we just simply can't rely on anybody else. It all revolves around the money. So you follow the money, you kind of follow the recommendations. So I don't think necessarily that everyone is to blame for their issues. I still think there's a little bit of blame there, but I still put the majority of the blame on the government and the big food lobbies that keep us sick, and then, you know, in turn rolls us over to the pharmaceutical companies to mitigate the effects of what we're eating. So really, I think people need to do their homework. They need to figure out what works for them, figure out what works for you. And like I said, you know, the easiest way to start that is to go carnivore 30 days and then slowly, one at a time, reintroduce foods in appropriate portions and figure out what foods are triggering whatever issue you have. You know, if you eat something and the next day you've gained 2 pounds, well, you kind of pretty much know you can't eat that. In my case, with my degenerative bone disease, I know I can't eat regular grains because if I eat it the next day, I'm going to hurt. I've discovered that I can have sourdough bread, but it has to be real sourdough, not this fake crap you get at the grocery store. But even then, I got to be careful because if I get too comfortable with it and eat too much of it, it's going to affect me. But I can have a little bit of it maybe once a week, and I'm okay with that. The carbs are low enough that it's not going to throw me out of ketosis. So really, you know, pay attention to the trends that are going out there. Listen to the doctors who are on board with eating the proper human diet. Follow people who practice it, and especially people who practice it and can share their labs, because the labs don't lie. You know, I guess I'm going to have to put mine up because the results that I got after 8 months of eating carnivore really kind of throw everything that they're saying is supposed to happen if you eat this way right out the window, because none of my numbers are where they claim they should be. They're where they actually should be. And to have my health being what it was when I was in my 20s, even though I'm in my 60s, kind of lends some credibility to this way of eating. So take that for what it's worth. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions or whatever, you need help with anything, just, you know, leave a little comment down there, and I'll do my best to respond and point you in the right direction if I don't have the answer. Thanks, and keep on